Hello there. All right. Why farmers... I lost where I was right there for a second. Why farmers in Kashmir only floating market are fighting for their livelihoods. Wait. Only farmers in Kashmir's only... Oh, Kashmir's only floating market are fighting for their livelihoods. Why farmers in Kashmir's only floating market. I think there's supposed to be apostrophe or somewhere there again. I got so lost on this one. Sorry. There have been a few titles which have just confused me because I'm trying to read them as they're going and there are no punctuation. So I'm just trying to go through robotically and not adding the same amount of space between each, and I just get confused. All right.
Every morning at sunrise, Kashmiri farmers gather at Srinagar's famous floating market on Dal Lake.
You know what? I'm going to turn up the volume a bit. It sounds a little low.
Muhammad Sadiq Khan paddles half a mile to get there from his home to the other side of the water. Just a decade ago, Muhammad would have met up with hundreds of other sellers. These days, though, there are just a few dozen left. Most of their families have traded here for generations. Srinagar's floating market has survived decades of conflict, political upheaval, and natural disasters. But today, the lake itself is at risk.
That looks like it's deserted. I mean, that's the thing, because I would think, because I've seen images in my head and from videos and from things I've watched where the market is lively, like water markets like this are lively. And here, it literally looks like just a few boats. It doesn't look like a market. It looks like neighbors just helping each other out.
Sewage dumping and pollution are suffocating the waters farmers depend on.
That's just turned into a toxic
We went
waste
to
dump.
Dal Lake in Indian-administered Kashmir to find out how this floating market is still standing.
It looks a little nicer. Just a top-head view.
Market market
Roughly 60,000 people depend on Dal Lake for their livelihoods.
Oh, that looks more like it. That looks better.
Many
there we
work
go.
in tourism and fishing. But the lake's agriculture is one of its most important industries. On this cold winter morning, Muhammad picks up collard greens to sell. What makes them unique?
I guess it's a good thing I don't look for vegetables. I mean, I understand that vegetarianism is very... Is it ism? Being vegetarian is very commonplace in India. It goes with the culture and religious aspects of it all. Honestly, here in the States, it would be way too costly to be a vegetarian. Let's just say that. It'd be way too... It's far cheaper to be a carnivore than it is to be a vegetarian, especially an organically grown... That's the thing. In India, it seems like everything is naturally grown. Everything is naturally organic. Everything would go for skyrocketed prices here in the U.S. But here in the U.S., everything that's cheap is the stuff that's mass-produced, which you would think it'd be everywhere like that, but I don't know.
Is how they're grown. People began farming inside the lake centuries ago. Over time, generations of farmers passed down their methods. These floating gardens are called Raad in Kashmiri. Some grow naturally, others are artificial. Farmers weave together wetland plants and bring up the roots and soil from the bottom of the lake to layer into what is essentially a floating mat.
Yep.
They plant
Smart.
collard leaves, turnips, carrots, and other produce.
That actually sounds very, very amazing. I would like to see that, because I've heard of things like that. I've even believe I've read books that have like this and sort of post-apocalyptic stories, and even like a few films that might even hint at things like this. But to actually see it and it growing fine, the soil, everything, because what is soil other than skin molecules, dead creatures, plants, rotting plants? It all basically goes back to the earth and adds nourishment to the earth. And the fact that it's literally making itself more and more and more of its own soil, to it becomes a bigger farm as it grows.
But the market's most popular crop actually grows
Holy
under
crap!
the water.
What the heck?
But the
Another Tata crane over here. But that's insane.
Carrots
It's
and
on
other
a
produce.
boat. Look at that freaking thing, swinging around
But the market's most
on a boat. On a boat. I would be so scared of this, because look at this. The whole thing looks like it's tipping around. It looked like it's gonna tip.
popular crop actually grows under the water.
That looks so cool, though. Honestly, I would love to drive that. I'd be
locally known
terrified,
as
but love to
ladru,
drive it.
is used in many Kashmiri dishes. And Dal Lake is considered one of the region's best producers.
ये जो चीज़ से टेस्ट पसंद क्या है public issue करोड़ बंदों का issue क्या नहीं
It
क्या
must be getting ruined as the water becomes more
The
and more
floating
polluted.
market runs every day for 2 hours, even in the dead of winter. Farmers wear an iconic woolen overcoat called a peran to keep warm.
Yeah.
They share a traditional Kashmiri green tea called kahwa that's mixed with cinnamon, cardamom, and saffron. And they wait for shopkeepers who travel from the city to buy their vegetables. It's a ritual that has been going on for at least 100 years.
ये market को मैं पुराने साने शुरू ऐसा पाई
Floating markets like this one were once a central part of life across Asia. They date back to the 14th century, but most still around today are less than 200 years old. They popped up in places like Vietnam, Thailand, and parts of India, where rivers, wetlands, and
And they became more of a tourist attraction where they make a lot of their income, I'm pretty sure, in those areas.
coastlines were the main routes for transporting people and goods. So trading on the water made a lot of sense. But as infrastructure improved and roads were built in these areas, vendors started to move their goods by land. By the mid-20th century, floating markets throughout Asia became tourist attractions.
Yep,
Like
there we
Dal
go.
Lake's market. Visitors filled the hundreds of houseboats lining the lake.
Yeah, that just
They'd
looks like a
take
tourist
rides in
attraction.
small boats called shikaras to get an up-close look at the floating market.
The old
By the
things that don't really
1980s,
exist no more.
tourism became a thriving industry.
ये तो बनियो tourist आव ना ज़्यादा वो बना एक शिकारी मुझे ना शिकारियाँ मैं जो shooting में वो था बच्चा था खानदार करने वो या पूरे ऐसा पता क्या
It's just a tourist attraction.
But Kashmir lies on a political and religious fault,
Yep.
and that has made it hard to keep attracting visitors.
Like, that's the thing. It's not even a tourist trap. It's because I would love to visit Kashmir. I would love to, but with how it's a political, hive of activity, and it's like a fault for who owns this land type of situation. It's crazy. I don't think I'd be able
India
to go.
and Pakistan began to fight over the territory after they gained independence from British rule in 1947. Unrest flared up again in the 1990s, and fighting between separatists and Indian security forces drove most tourists away. Despite ongoing conflict, farmers here
This is the thing, in everything I've seen of Kashmir, like even in the what is it, the Vikram? Is it Vic? No. Wait, no, Leo, the Leo, like the making of Leo that I watched. Kashmir looks amazing. It's freezing cold. And it looks just absolutely beautiful. Of course, I love the cold. Being in Alaska in the dead of winter was one of the best things ever, and I would love to go back.
Kept growing and selling produce from their boats every morning for decades. But in 2014, devastating floods brought everything to a halt for the first time in the market's history.
It was sorry, it was because my makan pe auntu tha.
Dal Lake was virtually deserted. The market stopped.
Dal go am suko ab de kharab. Ye nadir zemin ho go am si kharab.
It took farmers months to recover. Eventually, more than a year later, things began to pick up again. But as Srinagar's population grew, so did its environmental problems. By the 1980s, locals were complaining about the sewage being dumped from hundreds of houseboats. Studies show they're one of the lake's biggest polluters.
Inni aban kar sabzi kharab. Acha houseboat volti latrine, but volti latrine, soil se latrine. I'm seeing ke sabzi kharab. And go pollution andar. Zamin go kharab.
Giant to get the income from tourists who come to live in the houseboats. But honestly, knowing that it feeds directly back into the tourist attraction I would go visit makes me never want to visit. It's one of those things that once you find out, it's like that's an absolute no. Because I know they're like here, it's a pain. It's something you have to pay for because everything that all your bodily waste goes into the sewage tank, and then you have to get that sewage tank drained once it reaches a certain percentage. You never want to get it to 100% because the backflow, overflow, and the spillage, and it kind of can ruin a lot. But there's always a percentage threshold where you need to get it drained, and they just don't want to bother with that. They're cutting holes directly into their houseboat that just flood it directly back into the just crazy.
But that's just one part of a massive waste problem.
The slush when he tossed it was
The government admitted that more than 44 million liters of sewage from the city was being dumped into the lake every day. That's enough to fill more than 17 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
And okay, so I can understand, and I can't understand really. It's a way of cutting corners, and like I went to the sewage plant here where I live, well, nearby, the town nearby where I live. Where I live at right now, I have my own, I'm on my own sewage tank. So it needs to get drained when it fills up. It's the same kind of concept where it gets too full, you have to get it pumped and drained. You have to get it drained. But I went to the neighboring town, their sewage cleanup, waste and everything. The process that it goes through, the fact that it's all machine operated, and it literally just takes one person walking through, because I was walked through step by step as I was recording footage for a project that I was helping work on. It just seems so simplistic. You're literally walking there, watching it, double checking, and sometimes the infection is far worse. Like what is in it, it tells you the ratings of everything. And yes, that's how it is in more modernistic area, and they could afford that. They could afford to upgrade their system because they always upgrade it as it allowed it to. I'm pretty sure the system originally was far, far more difficult, but they just added machines to take over the load, and now it's just one person manning the whole system. But there were like 7 buildings that he would have to go from each and every one, checking the water, checking the everything, because if it didn't work, there's actually a valve that pumps it straight back to the front if it needs to cycle through again, which basically puts a reset on everything else to have to wait. But the process is just consistently ongoing. And it's even the machines themselves can dictate it on their own, whether it sends it back. But he just needs to make sure that the filters stay clean. The bleach is up to the bleach in the water, or the fluoride in the water, and everything that they put in for cleaning everything and killing the toxins, and all that is kept up, and everything that gets sent back out, the fertilizer and everything gets put to its proper location so it's used. It's a huge undertaking, especially if you don't have machines to do it. It would be a huge issue. So the city's just trying to cut a corner and poisoning the lake that they require for their livelihood. But it's not going to be in their lifetime. It's going to be in someone else's lifetime where it's going to ruin them. It's one of those things.
The government announced it would connect all houseboats to sewage plants last year. It banned plastic on the lakeshore and ordered mechanical dredgers to scoop out invasive weeds and other kinds of waste.
I want to drive one of those on the water.
But even a cleaned up Dal Lake would still face...
I'm curious, does it have a motor to steer where it goes, or is it literally just like a barge that is pulled by another boat? And then they just come and hook them up and then pull it somewhere else. I'm curious by that, or does it just shovel itself forward? As I don't know, because normally those have tires, like tank tracks, and they roll themselves on land. I've never seen it on water before.
Nope.
Muhammad says farming hasn't been profitable enough to entice the next generation. In fact, some vegetables cost him more to grow than what he can sell them for. And competition has grown fierce.
It was a rush. It was a pinchimudi to the park. That's one gamatan hun mall. Load kare and care, red and care,
So that's literally from a neighboring town which grows it easily, and then they just sell it on a boat for a cheaper price.
It's why many farmers are unsure about the future of the market. Some have left farming or work other jobs just to get by. Muhammad makes just enough to care for himself and his wife Salima Jan. But he refuses to let that discourage him. He has hope that the lake, its floating gardens, and the market will survive.
But
at that point in time, I'm... Yeah, that's the thing. At that point in time, I already feel like it's going to be too late to do anything because the gardens would have already deceased due to the toxicity in the water. However, with the plans of cleaning the water, it will get better, but the people who would pass on to the next generation, the farming and all that stuff, who would do it for a living, would have already passed on by that point in time, that there is no one except for hobbyists who do it just because it's a tourist attraction at that point. They're not really there for the fact that it's a way of life. They're there for the fact that, oh, let's show the tourists our water barge plant thing. Let's have them walk on our farm. Let's have them pick a plant for themselves as a souvenir. They can eat it on the way out. They can clean it in the water. That type of thing. It's going to become that instead of people actually doing it for a living. And that's what I would see it becoming, because water toxicity, yes, it's water. It will end up using all the toxic waste that's in it. It will end up cleaning over time, but how long will that take? That's a lot of things are in the air for that. But honestly, I like this. This was I would love to visit Kashmir at some point in time. I would love to. But we'll see. Thank you all for watching. Talk to you next time. Doodles.